person who's just come back from the day? Oh, depends on what's actually going on about by somebody who she said was dead this morning and apparently isn't there now.
Oh, goodness.
There was somebody in the booth.
Yeah.
Okay, start recording. Okay, we are ready to roll. So let's start with the recitation of the Heart Sutra.
We're starting. Sorry, they gossiping. Bye.
Bye.
I was expecting to go for a loop.
Sorry, people at home, we're starting just in a second.
So we're doing the Heart Sutra.
Yeah, we are totally doing the Heart Sutra. Oop. Sorry. What's happening? Okay, I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagavan was dwelling on Massive Vajra's mountain in Rajgira, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration of the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristics, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element and so on, up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extension of ignorance, and so on, up to including no aging in death and no extension of aging in death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell on the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of Nibbana. All the Buddhas who dwell in 3 times also manifestly and completely awaken to the unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata Om Dagyan Paragate Pada Samgate Bodhisattva. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and thus running in their entirety along with the words of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas were overjoyed and highly praised, thus spoken by the Bhagavan. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings, may I attain the state of the Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest assembly. From the accumulations I collect by may I attain the state of the Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, the highest assembly. From the accumulations I gather from generosity. So for my attempt to the state of Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. All right. So we have a full-on day. It's quite interesting. You would hope from a Dhamma perspective that every day would be just like that, full of Dhamma teachings, may the rain of Dhamma, may the Dhamma rain down and so on and so forth. But then when we think sometimes of full-on days like that, we get a bit lazy, don't we? At least I personally think that, oh no, it's going to be pretty hard. Should wish that every day should be like that. Particularly, how great it would be if every day would have teaching with his honest.
Yeah.
How great it would be if we could pray with that.
Yeah.
Just blessings.
Oops.
You know,
Sorry, I'm wondering if people at home heard me. Okay.
We heard you.
All right. Did you hear our recitation of the Heart Sutra?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. Apparently the mic was not on, but you nonetheless heard me. Yeah. Okay. So module 3, chapter number 4. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for coming back. Wow, Jane is in 1770. Wow, we're reaching far and beyond. I think that 1770 is north, like 5 hours north, I'd say. It's beautiful. Yeah. Okay, so I have a few points I wanted to discuss today. To begin with, I've been marking the exams. I have one person that sent me an exam, I think yesterday, so I'll go through that today. There are a couple of regulars that have been sending the exams up to now, but didn't get to do it. So you can still do it. I encourage you. Don't hold back. But one thing that did occur to me while I was marking it is some confusion with respect to afflictive and cognitive obscuration. So I thought of bringing it up today and trying maybe to be more clear about it. So most of you, I think, got it right with respect to what afflictions are, right? So afflictions are, first of all, afflictive consciousnesses. So anger, attachment, ignorance, all other afflictions that arise from them, plus the seeds of those afflictions, which means those potentials that can give rise to future moments of a similar type of consciousness. So I think that most of you got it right, which means that, and also one additional thing that I wanted to say with respect to the afflictions is that all the afflictions are wrong consciousnesses. All of them are wrong. There's no affliction that accords with reality. All of them are involved with a distortion of reality. So all afflictions are wrong consciousnesses. What about the other way around? Are all wrong consciousnesses afflictions? What do you think? Right, so all afflictions are wrong consciousnesses. Are all wrong consciousnesses afflictions or afflicted? All right, so you have like a gut feeling that says no, but you can't find an example. You also, all right, so I'll give you a hint. What about, what about if you look at it in terms of mental consciousnesses and physical consciousness or sensory consciousnesses? Well, well, no is not the answer that I was looking for, but I said that kind of, if you're looking for examples for a wrong consciousness that is not an affliction, what about a sense wrong consciousness? Like, for example, you can have a wrong eye consciousness, When your eye consciousness is affected by jaundice, you say jaundice?
Yes.
When you see things with a tint of yellow, it is a wrong eye consciousness, but it's not an affliction, right? So all afflictions are wrong consciousness, but not all wrong consciousnesses are afflictions. So that's to begin with. I think that the greatest sense of confusion would with respect to cognitive obscurations. So in the exam, and for those of you that are still going to do the exam and send me through the exam, so you can listen to the following part. I'm giving you the answer, so that's an incentive to do the exam. So I asked for examples for cognitive obscurations, and a few people wrote things like, for example, grasping a true existence, or conceiving of true existence, and so forth. So let's get it sorted. To begin with, the first rule that you need to hold on to is that there are absolutely no consciousnesses that are cognitive obscurations, right? If it's a cognitive obscuration, it's definitely not a consciousness. So it cannot grasp at anything. It cannot be an erroneous apprehension of something. There are no, here we're looking at that from the viewpoint of the Prasangika school of thought. So if it's a cognitive obscuration, it's definitely not a consciousness. It's not ignorance. It's not grasping at something. It's not apprehending anything. The things that are cognitive obscurations are appearances, mistaken appearances that dawn to the mind. And in a more specific way, it is the appearance of true existence, independent existence that dawn to the mind, but also the imprints, which are potentials that produce those appearances. So appearances that dawn to the mind are not consciousnesses, they are the appearance that appear to that consciousness. So that's to begin with. And also those potentials are not consciousnesses, they're just potentials. Those potentials were left by ignorance of grasping a true existence. Right, so we have ignorance of grasping a true existence. It is an afflictive obscuration. Ignorance of grasping a true existence also leaves seeds for future moments of ignorance. Those seeds are afflictive obscurations. It also leaves imprints that produce appearances of true existence. Those imprints are cognitive obscurations. Right, so this is a presentation that is unique to the Middle Way Consequent School of Thought, which is the school of thought that we follow. So I think that for many of us who attend teachings in general, without looking at a very specific way of separating out the consequent school of thought from the law schools of thought, we are used to this presentation that cognitive obscurations are appearances plus imprints. Other schools of thought present it differently. So Paul is asking, is there a difference between the appearance to the consciousness and the object? Well, there is a difference. So yeah, it's a yeah. So Chuck is saying that there's an appearance of true existence of the object, but the object itself doesn't truly exist. That's correct. So to begin with, when we look at how objects and consciousness operate together, then first of all, they are related, right? So particularly from the viewpoint, actually I say it in general, from the viewpoint of all schools of thought, when they define what an object is, they say that an object, for example, is that which is observed by valid cognition. That's the definition of an object. It is observed by valid cognition. So that's the definition of existence, actually. Existence is that which is observed by valid cognition. Existence and object are synonymous. So they set a connection between consciousness and its object. If there's a consciousness, it necessarily has an object. But in a most, sorry, before we get to that, and then they say that object has aspects. The aspects are cast to the consciousness, and the consciousness sees those aspects. So the consciousness apprehends these aspects. So when a consciousness observes an object, there are different things that appear to that consciousness. The object appears to that consciousness. If the object is impermanent, the impermanence of the object also appears to the consciousness. It doesn't mean that the consciousness apprehends or ascertains that impermanence, but it still appears to the consciousness. So there are different things that appear to the consciousness. So when we study awareness and knowers, and we'll look at objects,
Awareness and knowers.
yeah, a topic that is called loading, and we will study that probably next year. So at the beginning of the text, there is an explanation of consciousness and also the objects, different types of objects, appearing objects, apprehended objects, conceived objects, and so forth. So we speak about appearing objects. Like, for example, an eye consciousness apprehending blue. What appears to an eye consciousness is blue. The appearing object is blue. But there are also other things that appear to the consciousness. Like, for example, the impermanence of blue also appears to that consciousness. So I have, for example, I have a mental consciousness apprehending Yeshe. What appears to an eye consciousness apprehending Yeshe or Maggie is, mental consciousness apprehending Maggie is Maggie. If it's a thought of Maggie, let's say that I'm thinking Maggie or Yeshe. Yeshe appears to that thought. The generic image of Maggie or Yeshe appears to that thought. Maybe you could say that also impermanence appear to that thought. So there are different things that appear to that thought. So then, going back to Paul's question, is there a difference between the appearance to the consciousness and the object? What category of phenomena is the appearance?
An imprint on the mental continuum.
Sorry?
An imprint on the mental continuum.
Well, so we said that the appearances of true existence, the mistaken appearances of true existence, right? They are produced by imprints. So to begin with, it looks like there's a cause and effect relationship between the imprints and the appearance that is produced by those imprints. Right? The appearances of true existence are attributed to the imprints of true existence, right? So it looks as if, first of all, you could say that those appearances are impermanent. Now here, I have a doubt with respect to that. So I prefer to maybe not give a complete and definite answer with respect to that. I have to look at this.
What's the doubt? Because appearances of true existence are impermanent.
Sorry?
I said, what's the doubt? Because appearances of true existence are impermanent.
Yeah, so it seems that they should be impermanent, but for some reason I have a niggling doubt in my mind that says that maybe before we asserted them to be permanent. So Paul is asking, form consciousness, non-associated composite. I would say that they are non-associated composite, but no, I have to first of all just get rid of this niggling doubt that I have at the back of my mind, which kind of makes me that says that maybe we said that before that they are permanent, but I think that they should be impermanent because they are produced by imprints. If they are produced by imprints, by potentials, they should be impermanent. And out of form, consciousness, and non-associated composites, they should be non-associated composites. Sorry?
And we are able to get rid of that, so it is.
Yeah.
We've got a doubt.
Yeah. I have to sort myself out. Yeah. All right. So that's with respect to cognitive obscurations. Okay, let's go back to the text and pull a couple of points that we discussed today. So before we do that, I thought that since we had a 10-day break in a study, let's just look at the section that we are covering at the moment. So we are looking at cultivating conscientiousness with regards to the training, which is the second main point in chapter number 4. We spoke of being conscientious about abandoning wrongdoings, and we spoke about how if we don't do that, we'll end up in a miserable state of existence in the hell realms and so forth. So we spoke about that. Then we spoke about being conscientious about cultivating virtue. And then we started the section that explains being conscientious about abandoning afflictions. So we've covered that in the previous week, reflecting on the disadvantages of the afflictions, but I also thought that it'd be nice to point out also Lama Tsongkhapa's Lamrim Chenmo that has a very nice presentation of the disadvantages of the affliction. So let's see, where is it? There's something. That's the second, the first volume. The first volume, it is towards the end of the first volume under the section of true origins, the origins of suffering. So Lama Tsongkhapa says, with respect to the faults of the afflictions, when an affliction arises, at first it completely afflicts your mind, causing you to err with regards to what you're observing, reinforcing your latent proclivities. It's a nice word, proclivity, isn't it? Your latent proclivities, and causing the same sort of affliction to recur, right? So it speaks about, first of all, it afflicts your mind. So remember that in the previous week when we spoke about the nature of the affliction, we said that an affliction is a phenomenon such that when it arises, it creates this unpeacefulness of mind. It disturbs the mind, right? So it is causing you, so it afflicts your mind. It is causing you to err with regards to what you're observing. So it is what we've discussed just now. It is necessarily a wrong consciousness. It reinforces your latent proclivities, and it causing the same sort of affliction to recur. So that is associated also with the seeds, right? So it leaves seeds that give rise to future moment of consciousness of a similar type. It may harm you, others, or both. It leads to misdeeds in this life, in future lives, or in both. It creates experiences of pain and anguish, as well as the sufferings of birth and the like. It takes you far from nirvana. Your virtue is destroyed and your resources are depleted. In society, you are apprehensive, joyless, and devoid of confidence, while your notoriety spreads in all directions, and excellent persons such as teachers and protectors rebuke you. You die with regret, your aims are unfulfilled, and after death, you're reborn in a miserable realm. So it's quite a striking presentation of why afflictions are not good for us.
It's not good for us.
Yeah.
I just like that.
Yeah, yeah. Unrecommended by a doctor, the Buddha. All right, so Paul is saying one last doubt about the previous point is, what exists of the object aside from its appearances? But just a doubt, no need for an answer. I think that, when you speak about what exists of the object aside from its appearance, sometimes I think that kind of the question itself, sometimes when you think about it yourself, I'm not saying that this is how you think about it, Paul, but we tend to think that what else exists in the object and expecting that there's something that we can find from the side of the object. So we said that, for example, we as persons, an illustration of I or me, the real I or me, is just the I that is merely imputed and depends upon its basis of designation, the 5 aggregates. It's quite difficult to understand what is the mere I, because when we think of what is the actual me, or real me, we still have that hope that we'd be able to find something here within this combination of mind. So then saying that it is just a mere I, it's still very unclear to us what is actually I or me, because we have an expectation that there is something there. And the same thing also, I think, with respect to objects, like, for example, what is, for example, fire? What is earth? What is dog? What is table? There's, I think, an expectation that there's still be something concrete that would be able to hold on to, but exists as being merely imputed. It's not that they are names, just names. They are objects, but exist as being merely imputed. So anyway, Paul, you said no need for an answer. I didn't answer. I just said that just spoke about it out loud. So Jason says, why do we say these seeds and imprints are stored again? So a common presentation that is common to all schools of thought, most schools of thought, I'd say, is that the imprints and seeds are stored in the mental consciousness, primary mental consciousness. The middle way consequence school of thought goes a step further, because they say that when we think about past and future lifetimes, and we say that we need to hold on to the presentation of karma. So I perform an action in this life, and I experience the result of that action in next lifetime. We need to posit an I, a person, that is the one that created the action and the one that experiences those actions. So some schools of thought say that, therefore, since those imprints and seeds are stored on the mental consciousness, and the mental consciousness is that which goes from this lifetime to the next, the real person, the real I, is the consciousness, the primary consciousness. To that, the middle way consequence school of thought says that this is incorrect, because if you say that the real person is the mental consciousness, you are asserting that when you look for the person, you find that person. It is the mental consciousness. This is the person that goes from this lifetime to the next. And if you say it like that, then the middle way consequence school of thought says that, therefore, you're setting an inherently existing person. So you can say that imprints and seeds are infused on the mental consciousness, but on top of that, they say that, but really what you should say is that they are infused on the mere I. So the container for seeds and imprints is the mere I. Yeah, they can be stored also on consciousness, but the repository for seeds and imprints is the mere I. So that is a point that is unique to the consequence school. All right, so let's go back to this. So we spoke in the previous week about the disadvantages of the afflictions. We started section B. It is inappropriate to feel weary of the hardships involved in abandoning the afflictions. And today we started with, it is reasonable to delight to be diligent, in the practice of destroying the afflictions. So we had a discussion, I think a longer discussion with respect to the 4 lines, covering the last 2 lines in verse 42 and verse 43, the first 2 lines in verse 43, and I just wanted to maybe highlight a couple of points with respect to this discussion. So it says, since this is the case, I should never withdraw from vanquishing the afflictions. I shall adhere to this, and resenting them, I shall meet them in battle. So we had a discussion about it because Dechen said that kind of she feels a bit uncomfortable in saying that we should resent the affliction or hate the affliction, be angry with the afflictions and so forth, because from a, you could say that from a psychological perspective, it could be quite dangerous. And we had a discussion about it after class. So I think that sometimes we identify with our afflictions, right? So if anger arises in our mind, and it arises often, we tend to think that I'm an angry person, and therefore I'm a negative person, I'm a bad person. If attachment arises in our mind, we can say I'm a lustful person, I have such great desire, I'm such a bad person. So we have that ability to completely identify with our afflictions to the point in which we say that we draw a conclusion that because I have anger, and anger is a negative state of mind, I'm a bad person. So I think that the question that Dechen was asking goes along this line of identifying with our afflictions. But I think that from a Buddhist perspective, we said that we need to separate between the afflictions and the person, the afflictions and the actions that they motivate. And it's the same thing that also goes with respect to cultivating love and compassion. I think that Isona says that often. We distinguish between the person and the actions of that person. So we can condemn the actions of a certain person. It doesn't mean that we hate that person. So we could condemn their actions, but we still develop a sense of compassion to that person. So the same thing also applies to us, right? So we condemn the afflictions. We see the afflictions as faulty, but it doesn't make us become a negative person, or definitely not inherently negative or inherently bad. I mean, you could say that temporarily when we are taken by anger, by hatred, when being racist or whatever, go on a racist tirade, then for the time being, we are a bad person, you can say on a conventional term. But we're not inherently bad in that those afflictions arise. If we cultivate countermeasures, they will be gone, right? So they're not inherent to the mind. We're not inherently bad. So that's one point.
Can I raise a different point, or have you got another point about
I have a few points, but let's no.
You might cover it.
No, actually, maybe you bring it, because I wanted to go on looking at anger and other stuff. So
Okay.
yeah.
So I guess in relation to this, I don't know if I'm loud enough. I'm trying not to aspirate or whatever it is too much.
I think that they should hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so they can hear.
Yeah.
Paul can hear. Okay, so one of the things I was thinking about, actually, this distinction between the person and their anger, or the act of anger, is also, it comes up more extensively here, but it's also there because Dechen mentioned, what about people who are not Buddhist or don't have that understanding? In Christianity, they say blame the sin, not the sinner. I think they say have compassion for the sinner. So that notion is there. But there are two things. One, Geshe-la was talking about. First, we identify the affliction. So if one jumps straight to applying an antidote and you haven't identified the affliction, that's one thing. But also, anger is a continuum. So it's not like it's just the manifest anger. It's the whole continuum from the very slightest irritation in the mental continuum. So that's one aspect. But the other aspect is this is a Bodhisattva training. So it's not, you wouldn't go one with hope, and go and say to somebody who doesn't even understand Buddhism at all, let alone someone who's only just the introductory level Buddhist, you know, it's got to see this is a great scope practice, and there's a whole sort of context to practice that comes before that. So that was just a couple of thoughts I had around this.
Yeah, in a sense of when you point out the faults of the afflictions, you point them out to in a scenario that someone is interested in learning why anger is a negative state of mind. You know, so I think that the whole context on the conversation would be set up in a sense that anger is a negative state of mind, but it doesn't make you negative. It's like you can.
It's impermanent.
Yeah, it's impermanent. So I think that the whole backdrop to this conversation, I think, would not be something that would be prone to make that person become suicidal or kind of have low self-esteem and so forth. I think that still we can say that, you know, we approach the Buddhist tradition from different dispositions, with different inclinations. There are people that I think tend to have a lower self-esteem and tend to dig their own fault, so to be more focused on their own fault. So, you know, it is possible that they become more sensitive, that they are more prone to thinking that if anger arises, I've completely failed in my spiritual practice and therefore I'm completely useless. I mean, people are, I think, still prone to that. We are different to each other. We have different strengths and weaknesses. So I think that it is still kind of valid point, but I think that the whole backdrop of this teaching is to separate between, no, we're still separating between the person and the afflictions. But it's good that you brought up this point of identifying anger. So maybe we can think of it as righteous anger. Kind of can't contextualize it.
Righteous anger, I mean, Donna might want to give you an example, but it's like when you go and protest because anger has got you out onto the street, if you're lucky to be in a place where you can be on the street, and then you're protesting against whatever, you know, coal mines or whatever you're protesting against. And people say that that comes from anger. So there's a sense of justice or against abuse and so forth. So that's the sort of context of righteous, what is called righteous anger. But then we have to investigate that, whether it's anger or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, also Kate says also righteous anger relating to retaliating against injustice. So I think that it's relevant to or connected with what you say. So in light of that, kind of what I thought of looking at is anger, because also we had a discussion about what the meaning is of resenting the afflictions, of being angry with the affliction. So I looked at the definition of anger. Right? So anger says that it is a malice towards sentient beings, suffering, and phenomena that are the sources of suffering. So I was trying to think of where the anger towards the affliction fits the definition of anger. Malice is an intention to harm, right? Or it is a cruel mind. It is a harsh mind towards sentient.
It's an intention to harm, but it's not it's a positive intention to harm in a virtuous direction.
Yeah.
And it's not towards sentient beings.
Well, it is towards sentient beings, suffering, and phenomena that are sources of suffering. Here we're just looking at the definition of anger. So what about afflictions? Are afflictions sources of suffering?
Yes.
So there are sources of suffering. So could you say that malice, which means the intention to harm the source of suffering, the afflictions, fits the definition of the root affliction of anger?
It's not malice.
Malice is such a strong word.
Yeah, malice is
it's
strong.
Not malice, and that's the thing. It's not that malicious mind. It's a virtuous mind.
Yeah.
So that's the distinction.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a really kind of definite answer to that, but I tend to agree with you guys.
It's like, a mother yells at the kid to get off the road because she knows if she just says, "Oh, darling, it would be nice to get off the road." It sounds like anger, right? It's to get their attention.
But then we also have we have resentment. this is also sometimes is used with respect to the affliction. I should resent my affliction. So it is a mind refusing to let go of continue of anger, wishes to harm or retaliate. It is involved with anger. So I think that we can also think of retaliation against, resentment against afflictions, in that continuously we see our afflictions as faulty. And should an opportunity to harm them arise, we think that I will harm them. In that sense, it fits the definition of, or it fits the sentiment of resentment, right? So it is bearing a grudge against the afflictions, thinking that I shall meet you in battle.
Isn't that a negative and a negative make it positive? Because it's, you've got a negative state of mind. And so generally with the afflictions, we, as Geshe said, there's a certain comfort or familiarity, you can say familiarity today, with in other words, we identify with the affliction rather than see it as dangerous. And so by putting a negative towards the negative, well, eventually it does, when that also Geshe said it will subdue. That's the thing, that will abate. When the affliction goes, that resentment's not there because there's nothing to be resentful at, rather than when you're angry at someone, even let it go, you might just turn that anger to someone else or something.
Yeah, so I found this explanation that Geshe gave today to be really nice. I haven't had it before, so I'll just repeat it. So Geshe said that you can say that anger towards the affliction is such that you don't need to apply an antidote to it. That when the afflictions will be abandoned, there will also not be anger towards them, which is something that I wanted to also connect Khenpo Kunpel's commentary to that, because he also explains that in an interesting way. So it says, so that's in page 83, section 158. Thus, one may think, since this clinging to and holding a grudge are attachment and aversion, they must be rejected. So clinging to, like, for example, Geshe mentioned today our appreciation of love and compassion, right? So, or for example, the determination to emerge from cyclic existence. This is actually a question that comes up every once in a while. If I have this strong wish to live cyclic existence, isn't it attachment? Or having any wish, if I have a wish to become Buddha, isn't it attachment? Isn't it desire? And we should abandon all desires, right? So it's similar to that. Let's look at that. So,
and maybe in that way you see that you can see that attachment will dissipate immediately. You have a direct realization of emptiness. That attachment won't be there. You could say it's an attachment. Well, it's an attachment to a virtuous object. You could say that while it will be an affliction, won't it? While we have a mind of afflictions, like it won't be a purely.
It's not really attachment, I don't think, because attachment superimposes good qualities upon something. So how can you put above and beyond good qualities of the Buddha and
Limitless,
and everything? So it's not really attachment.
Yeah, so I think that one way of approaching that, and this is also a point that I wanted to bring up, so thank you. So with attachment and anger, both of them are wrong consciousnesses, which begin with exaggeration of reality. So we exaggerate either negative qualities or bad quality or positive qualities. So, for example, resenting the afflictions, if resenting the afflictions would be a wrong consciousness, then we need to have an exaggeration of the negative qualities of the afflictions. It's not that it's impossible, right? We can exaggerate the negative qualities of the afflictions,
But I think we tend to underestimate.
Yeah, we tend to underestimate them. But we can resent the afflictions also in an accurate way, in that when we understand what the faults of the afflictions are, in the way that, for example, Lama Tsongkhapa explained that quite concisely, that's not an exaggeration of the faults and affliction, that's a realistic reading of the faults of the afflictions. And also previously, Shantideva himself, in the previous verses, spoke about how the afflictions are detrimental to oneself and also detrimental to others. So,
just one other example, which wasn't one of these root poisons, but Rinpoche wrote wholesome fear. So that fear can be seen as an afflicted state of mind, but we use fear to generate renunciation.
to go for refuge, yeah.
Going for refuge, etc.
No, it's funny when I started to go deeply into the topic of refuge, like many years ago, I found it a bit disappointing that the cause for refuge is fear. Because I think that we all want to go for refuge with kind of a sense of being an intelligent I, but a cause for going for refuge is fear from miserable states in the future. So anyway, also with respect to, I think that also with respect to having a desire to attain this state of enlightenment, it is a state of such marvelous qualities that
inexpressible.
Yeah, I mean, you can also, I think, exaggerate them or have an unrealistic reading of the state of Buddha.
Maybe not exaggerating, but maybe misconception.
Yeah, I mean, like in a sense that you can say that if I become a Buddha, I'll be a creator. I create universes. I'll destroy universes. That is like an exaggeration of, I'll have the power to do that. So that's an exaggeration of the state of Buddhahood, and you can desire those excellent. Yeah. Well, luckily, it is a wrong consciousness. Yeah. So Paul says that he thinks that it's possible to exaggerate the negative. I don't think it's possible to exaggerate the negative qualities of the afflictions that create all sufferings. Yeah. Yeah. So.
Olaf had a good point too, fighting fire with fire.
Sorry, I missed that. Let's look it up.
Like
Olaf, yeah. Like fighting fire with fire. They neutralize each other.
Yes.
The converging of bushfires.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually quite interesting. Kind of, that's a side comment, but everyone is totally worried about the corona, right? Rightfully, but climate change is like 1,000 times more serious than that, and kind of the sense that totally off the table. But I'd say that probably the government is promoting more dangerous policies at the moment in terms of climate change. Anyway, that's one might think, since this clinging to and holding grudge are attachment and aversion, that was for you, Paul, by the way, they must be rejected. But concerning afflictions of this type, clinging to the remedy and holding a grudge against what must be overcome, they're what destroys afflictions. At that time, one is a beginner. That therefore not to be rejected, meaning that temporarily they should not be abandoned, right? So temporarily, on a temporary basis, resenting the afflictions or liking the antidotes is not to be abandoned. But this is interesting. Since there are obscurations of cognition, they must eventually be overcome.
I don't think that's what Geshe was saying this morning. And in fact, they will be.
Well, they will, but kind of this comment is really interesting because we say that there are no consciousnesses that are cognitive obscurations. So resenting the afflictions or liking the antidotes, here it says to be obscurations of cognition, but actually when we speak of what is obscuration to knowledge, they are not. So how do we think about it?
Well, I assumed that it was afflictive obscurations. Right, I know what it says. Mm.
Well, you know, for me, well, when I looked at that statement, I thought myself, a Buddha is free from conceptuality. All the consciousnesses of Buddha are perceptual. So the Buddha doesn't have a thought or a wish, in that it is not a conceptual thought. It is not a conceptual wish. The Buddha doesn't have a thought, my afflictions are negative. I need to abandon those afflictions. You can say that therefore all conceptions are to be abandoned. Now, in order to rid ourselves of those conceptions, we need to eliminate cognitive obscurations. So long as cognitive obscurations are there, for that long, we'll have conceptions. So my way of interpreting that statement is to say that there are cognitive obscurations from the viewpoint of temporarily there are thoughts. I need to attain the state of enlightenment, or I need to reject my afflictions. There are thoughts, there are conceptual thoughts, temporarily we need them, but ultimately, to become Buddha, we also need to abandon those conceptions. I don't know if that's a right interpretation, but maybe this is one way that you can look at it. So, just last point before we leave it here for now. Yeah.
So that anger you can have to get rid of anger, because that anger will go.
Yeah.
Get rid of that anger.
But
That's
it
what
is-
Geshe said this morning too.
But Geshe was saying this morning that at the time of abandoning afflictions, so that and it hasn't got an object.
Yeah.
So that would be at the time, so it's before you attain Buddhahood, it's at the time of direct realization of emptiness, so perceptual realization of emptiness. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I think that you can have kind of multiple takes on that. It's not that there's only one right answer to it. So Geshe-la's point in the morning was that temporarily you can resent the afflictions. Once the afflictions are not there, there's nothing to resent. Therefore, resentment will not be there. I think that this is paraphrasing what he said, right? Yeah. So that's one explanation. Another explanation, I think, is what is found here is that it's also temporarily, we need to do it, but ultimately there are cognitive obscurations, and my idea is that because there are conceptions, so you'll have to get rid of those conceptions once you become Buddha. It doesn't mean that when you become Buddha, you need to stop thinking. It's more like a Buddha can act for the sake of others spontaneously and uninterruptedly. So it's free from the cognitive constraints that we have, from the conceptual constraints that we have. We can only act if we think about it conceptually, in a sense that we can act for the sake of others only if we think about it. But a Buddha can act for the sake of others without even having to think about it, because a Buddha has done it for 3 great countless eons in accustoming themselves to be of benefit to others, with the intention to be of benefit to others, that they carry no, you can say that they're carried by the volition of being of benefit to others. Is fear conceptual or perceptual? It is definitely not perceptual, because to be perceptual, it needs to be a correct consciousness. What about fearing for your life?
Yeah, it's grasping itself. It's grasping that.
Yeah.
This body.
Yeah, I think that fear would be connected with a conceptual consciousness. A perceptual consciousness is necessarily correct, or it accords with the fact. I think that the implication is that it is a realizing consciousness. Sorry, no. erase that. It's not necessarily a realizing consciousness. You have a perceptual consciousness which doesn't ascertain its objects. It's not like, for example, an eye consciousness to which an object appears without being ascertained. Kate says, for this beginner, to reject afflictions and attach to remedy makes helpful sense and greatly encouraging. Thank you for this clarification. It's also good for me. Thank you. Yeah, so one more point before we leave it here for today. So verse 40, so then we've covered this section. It is reasonable to be diligent in practice of destroying the afflictions. And then point C in that section of being conscientious about abandoning the afflictions is cultivating joy that it is possible to abandon the afflictions if effort is made. Now, verse 45 says, if afflictions in your own continuum are completely uprooted, there is no place supportive of them in your mind. So, quickly looking at this verse, ordinary enemies, when expelled from one country, simply settle down in another and embrace it. And when their capacity is recovered, then they then return. But the way of this enemy, my afflictions, is different. So we say that once you uproot the afflictions, they do not return. So the point that I wanted to bring up for discussion, I think that we probably won't have the time to have a lengthy discussion, is what is the meaning of uprooting the afflictions and why would it not return? Cut them from the root. What does it mean to cut them from the root?
They're no longer in your mental continuum. Actually, yes, there is the idea of you will fix them.
Yeah, you kind of.
There's no room for them in your mental continuum, so they're not there. They don't exist.
It's like having that analogy, they're like a robber, you kick them out of the house and lock the door. So they can't come back.
So, for example, if I have strong attachment to chocolate, dark chocolate, let's say, fictitious situation, and I want to counteract that strong attachment, I can think of all the disadvantages of overeating dark chocolate, right? High level of cholesterol, sugar. Sorry?
Even eating rather than overeating.
Even
eating it.
yourself sick because you've eaten so much and then you won't want to have it anymore.
Yeah.
Until the next time.
So, so I can apply those antidotes on, meditating on the unattractive aspects of the object, but it's not uprooting it, isn't it?
No.
So what is the meaning of uprooting? Overcoming it. How do I overcome my afflictions? Realization of emptiness. Why is a realization of emptiness uprooting the afflictions to the point in which they cannot arise again?
Uproots the root ignorance.
Because it uproots the root that is ignorance. So, and for that you need a perceptual realization of emptiness, right? So we said that so I think that Geshe also brought it up in his session. He says that really what you need to do is to be diligent in developing wisdom that realizes emptiness, but not just wisdom that realizes emptiness. That's the first step. You need to then have a perceptual realization of emptiness, because a perceptual realization of emptiness eliminates not only ignorance, but also the seeds of ignorance. So if you eliminate the seeds, not only the consciousness, but the seeds, you eliminate the potentials for future occurrences of ignorance. If you burn out the seeds, ignorance will no longer arise, and therefore also other afflictions will no longer arise. That is the meaning of kicking it out, right? So uprooting our afflictions is to eliminate the seeds of ignorance. Okay, let's leave it here for now.
Okay, so dedications in English.
Dedication in English, okay. May I quickly become Guru, Lord Buddha, and lead each and every sentient being to his enlightened realm because of these merits. May the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta, which has not arisen and rise and grow, may that which is arisen never diminish, but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Shinrazik Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. You uphold the subdued small way, who serves the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine. O masterfully accomplished with magnificent prayers, honoring the three jewels, protector of myself and others, your disciples, please live long.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, people. So tomorrow we'll have a similar routine. So His Honest will continue with his teaching tomorrow and the day after. So I presume that the teachings, His Honest's teaching will go till 3 o'clock also tomorrow and the day after. Yeah, so we just have to be flexible. We'll start 15 minutes after His Honest. Thank you. No, it's okay. You're helping me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carlton.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Thank you, Carlson.
Thank
Thank
you.
Carlson.
You, Jane, in 1770.
Yeah, enjoy 7070.
Enjoy, Jane.
See you
Wow.
in 1770.
So, such a